out to come to the bookshop. We're all very excited to have you here. We have some very special guests tonight. We are introducing Paul Scheer, who's the author of Joyful Recollections of Trauma, a new book. We're very excited to read it. And with him tonight is Jessica St. Clair as well. So we'll be about a 2-minute conversation between the two of them. We'll open up to a nice Q&A, and we have 10 books to buy and sign. So introducing our guest of honor, Paul Scheer.
Hi, everybody. Hi. Hi. Hello. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming and being here. I'm so excited you're all here. I'm sorry I had to creepily hide in the corner like I wasn't here, but that's the way we do it. This is great, and I appreciate you all coming on at 6 o'clock on a Tuesday. I also want to appreciate that you are not here with these books. I don't know if you've seen these, but these are books that were released on Amazon. The minute I announced my book, these came out, and they're AI-generated books. And this is a beautiful image of me, obviously. It really captures the essence of me right there, you see. But this was the one that I think, honestly, really, that does me justice. This looks a lot more. What I do love about this thing is like it's generated by AI. It has nothing to do with my book, but they don't want to repeat certain things. So I have a friend, Rob Hubel. I've worked with Rob Hubel on a bunch of different things, but they view Rob's name as like a synonym of Rob, like robbery. So it will change. So sometimes it's like, oh, he performs with Steel Hubel, Loot Hubel, and then and they never call Human Giant the same name. Human Giant, Human Goliath, Human Monster, and there was this one here. I want to see if I can find this one thing. It always is just changing. They say that I was a star of Dark Monday, Black Monday, and if you ever caught my show, New Off the Boat, which is fresh off the boat. So it really is. It's great. And you might be saying, well, Paul, are you supporting this by spending $15 and $12? Yeah, I am. So I apologize for that. But come on in. Hey, how you doing? Sorry. Okay. You can sit over here. So there's more comfortable couches. You don't have to squeeze all the way in there. I'm so excited because we're going to have an amazing, my moderator, she's a friend, she's amazing. But I also thought maybe because it's a little intimate setting, I would read a little bit, if that's okay. Is that okay with everybody? All right, great. So I'm going to read just from this first chapter here. Let's see how this goes. So the book is kind of spread up into two parts. The first part is a lot more about my childhood, and the second part is not my childhood, but really how that childhood kind of affected me. And this is this first chapter of the book. Confession. I'm an arsonist. I mean, I guess technically I was more of a fire starter, like Drew Barrymore in Firestarter, but with a way less convoluted backstory. Because when I was in the 5th grade, I almost accidentally burned a family resort to the ground just because I didn't want to ride horses. But let me not get ahead of myself. Okay, I was the only child of divorced parents. And when I was 7 years old, my mom got remarried to my stepdad, Hunter. Now, he was completely different than my dad. He was twice divorced with multiple kids. He's a commercial truck driver for a local supermarket chain who wore cowboy boots and raised quail and owned horses and guns. I mean, lots and lots of guns. Come on in. While not physically opposing, you come over here. There's more room. Don't worry about it. I'm reading this first chapter. You haven't missed much. It's just a couple things. While not physically imposing, he carried himself with the energy of a person who was looking for a fight or just got finished with one. And the knife on his cowboy belt only, now I've messed up for nobody. Let's say, and the knife on his cowboy belt only reinforced that he was someone you didn't want to fuck with. Now, the first time I felt that energy directed at me was when I told him I don't want to call him Dad, but I would prefer to call him by his actual name, Hunter. Now, this is largely in part because my real dad was very much a part of my daily life. And honestly, it felt weird to call this other man who I barely knew Dad. However, instead of accepting my decision with grace, he's already a father to his own kids, Hunter stormed out of the room in anger and then proceeded not to speak to me and ignore my presence like I was a ghost. Now, I lasted for about a week, until I finally broke when he locked me out of the house in my pajamas with nothing on my feet in the middle of the winter. And I was banging on the door and he wouldn't let me in until I said, "Dad, let me in." When I did, the door opened and that was that. And I began to learn this delicate dance that I needed to do around Hunter. I had to play by his rules to get what I needed. And at times, he could be gregarious, silly, and loving. And then as quickly as he could snap your fingers, he'd be vindictive, mean, and violent. And once, during a game of Monopoly that he'd been losing, he landed on one of my properties. And I looked down at my deed to see how much I was owed. But he locked eyes with me. He's like, "Do you really want to charge me?" It was an odd question, right? Yes, I want to charge you. That's the game, right? Yeah, I appointed. "Oh, no, you owe me $300. And he gave me another warning. He was like, "Think about what you're doing." And all of a sudden, the energy just shifted. Something much bigger was happening, but I didn't get it yet. And as he held eye contact with me, I, again, just told him, "Rent's $375." And then within an instant, he just reached across the table and grabbed my neck and started choking me. And as he held my neck, he kept on saying, "Do you want to charge me?" I shook my head, grasping for air. No. And I just fell back into my seat, struggling to breathe, while he just grabbed the dice and rolled for his next turn. And that was it. We were just back in the game. And moments like this just came as quickly as they went in our house. They were never acknowledged, never apologized for, and never seemed to have consequences, making me wonder if they even happened at all. Now, Hunter's 3 children from his previous marriages, Jennifer, Krista, and Hunter Jr., came in and out of our lives. Hunter Jr. was an adult. I didn't really meet him until he moved next door a few years after my mom married Hunter. And Jennifer and Krista were just teenagers who lived with their mom and would occasionally spend some of their weekends at my mom's house when I was at my dad's house. But then one day, Jennifer moved in for reasons never fully explained. And all of a sudden, I went from being an only child to having a big sister. And she was cool. She sported this very heavy purple eyeliner. She loved The Who and Led Zeppelin. And she had a boyfriend, wore a jean jacket with patches and buttons I didn't understand. But I thought that was cool. Come on in. Yeah, come on in. There. Now, you can come over here because there's more space over here. You can go. Yeah, please, come on. I'm just talking about, I met my stepsister at a certain point in my life, and this you'll catch up. You'll get it. All right, great. There you go. But our age difference was large. She was in high school, and I was only in the 4th grade. And since I spent weekends with my dad, we wound up kind of just being weekday siblings. She didn't take the bus with me. Her door was often closed, and she came home from work after I was asleep. So whenever we did have time together, it was great. We'd talk about our crushes, go on walks, and during the holidays, we'd sneak around the house to find hidden Christmas gifts. Now, Jennifer and I did go on 2 family vacations together. We once visited the Trapp Family Lodge, which is where I assume the Sound of Music took place. Only found out a handful of years later that the Von Trapps were not from Vermont, and Hitler never made his way up the eastern seaboard of the United States. Now, usually the places that we visited were geared towards adults, and the kids were kind of funneled off to their own activities. But on this vacation that we took together to the Rocking Horse Ranch, when I was in the 4th grade, it was a merger of both experiences. Family, fun, and kids. It was a dude ranch, a place where city slickers went to get out of their urban lives, like a family-themed Club Med. Rocking Horse Ranch offered a wide variety of horse-related activities. I mean, you could go horseback riding, watch a horseshoeing demonstration, take a barn tour to see the horses in their natural habitat, or play a game of horseshoes with comically large inflatable horseshoes. This place was a goddamn nightmare, okay? And I don't have anything against horses, but at the time, my family home on Long Island had a barn with 3 horses in our backyard. So vacationing where the number one attraction was horseback riding really didn't seem like a vacation. Now you might be thinking, Paul, you had 3 horses? You can't just gloss over that. Were you rich? And the answer is no, I was not rich, okay? Honestly, I don't know where they came from. I was told a family friend gave us them or gave us first dibs on horses that were about to be put down. But as I typed that, it kind of feels like total horseshit, pun intended. Now, as a kid, I didn't really ask too many questions. I just accepted the reality I was given, which you will see throughout this book is a reoccurring theme. I also never asked why on a residential block it was okay to corral the horses in our front yard and house them in a makeshift barn in the backyard at night. I mean, that feels like it should have broken a lot of zoning laws. All right, but when my family arrived at Rocking Horse Ranch, we were shown to 2 adjoining cabins that shared a porch, one for Jennifer and me, and the other for Hunter and my mom. Now, this was very early on in their relationship, and it seemed like things were going well. It was like a honeymoon period. And I remember just kind of being grossed out by the amount of PDA they engaged in. But I think honestly for them, the reason why they wanted to go here is because at a family inclusive resort, parents can kind of drop their kids off at some activity, knowing that they can escape the property line, and adults can just kind of like get it on, which is exactly what I think my mom and Hunter were about to do. As a matter of fact, I don't even really want to think that much about it. And if I will say one thing, the one note my mom had about this book was that I wrote about that. So what can you do? But I was excited. Jennifer and I would be spending all of our time together, which is something I was really longing for. Now, in addition to horseback riding, each day at the ranch was packed with physically demanding, kid-friendly activities: climbing, archery, swimming. Now, I know that sounds like a dream to many people, but as a kid who found reasons to opt out of gym class, I thought this was the worst thing ever. I was participating in a 12-hour gym class that spanned multiple days. And since I was younger, I had to do the activities, and the only one I wanted to do, archery, I couldn't participate in because I wasn't old enough. I just didn't sit on the side and watch people shoot bow and arrows. Now, Jennifer, on the other hand, she was older, and she got to do whatever she wanted, which was, you come in, there's space, yeah, please. She could do whatever she wanted to do, which is escape into the woods with her Walkman. She could listen to bootleg Pete Townsend concerts, smoke cigarettes. But here I was, plopped in a group of kids I didn't know, doing things I could do at home, but hated. Now, after the first 2 days, I just begged my mom and Hunter, don't make me participate in another day of leisurely horse rides and awkward snack breaks. So we made a deal. I could skip out on the mandatory fun activities as long as it didn't bother the adults all day until 5 p.m. Not bad, 5 p.m., remember this. Now, I think they were trying to call my bluff, but I took the challenge with reckless abandon. And as the sun rose the next morning, a smile crossed my face. I had nothing to do. The world was my oyster. And as an only child, I was used to keeping myself occupied for hours on end. Making a snack became a cooking show for no one, and I never really did chores. Instead, I became a character hired to do my chores, and I'd boss myself around, And I talked to a lot of people who just were not there, and anything just to break up the silence of being alone in my house. And when I did play, I just improvised movies of my own creation and act out all the characters. Now, since I was a kid who grew up on action movies, ones with like troubled cops whose personal lives were a complete mess and had multiple vices, but were damn good at their jobs, I created my own. I was Lance Hansen, a disgraced cop in his mid-40s. Every kid's dream. Now, Lance was being called back to the force for one more case. And whenever I was alone, the movie would start from right when it ended. And that first free day on the ranch, I was back to being Lance on a big case. To outside observers, it probably looked like I was wandering aimlessly around just talking to myself, which I was. Now, little did they know that where I was playing, this 3-foot wide dry creek bed behind our cabin, that was going to be the scene of an epic battle. In my mind, that was the East River, and Lance was trying to stop a mad bomber. As I tried to talk down the other bomber, also played by me, I leaped back and forth across the ravine in a heated war of words. But talking wasn't working. This bomber had one thing on his mind: carnage. Now, Lance also was having a hard time in his personal life. He had, started smoking again. Now, luckily, I knew where Jennifer had hidden her stash. I grabbed a cigarette from the pack hidden behind her bed and a pack of Rocking Horse Ranch matches from the room's ashtray. I love a prop. Now, I put the cigarette in my mouth and I lit it. Now, I know it sounds like I was smoking, but I swear I wasn't. This is for the character. This is an acting choice. And the scene kind of just began. Well, if it isn't Lance Hansen, I thought they put you out to pasture for killing all those kids. It was my fault. That bus had no brakes. Funny, neither does this tram. It's an express to hell. You can't do this. How do you say, yes, I can? I decided the scene needed more tension, so I ratcheted up the drama. Lance, is that you? Diane? Daddy! That's right, Lance's ex-wife, Diane, and child were on the tram, and I played all 4 roles simultaneously. You son of a bitch. Lance, help us! Daddy, help me! Oh, I wish I had the camera. I love a family reunion. Diane, just calm down. Oh, she left you because you weren't around, and now she'll die because you are. How poetic. I have a poem for you. Roses are red, violets are blue. If you blow up me, I blow up you. And Lance throws his cigarette at Kazmarek. Kazmarek catches on fire and falls off the tram. No, how ironic. I light the fuse, but now I am the fuse. I just continued acting out this scene in mind, climbing back into the tram to reunite with my wife and daughter. Daddy, let's go get ice cream. I love you, Lance. And they passionately kiss. And I want you to know I acted out that kiss, and it was sexy. So happy with my performance, I moved on to do something else, only to see that a small fire had started where the cigarette had landed, and it was spreading quickly. Now, I tried to stomp it out, which didn't work. I mean, I really had never seen anything like this before. You know, my heart started racing, and I stared as the flames grew. Now, I would have said, and I know so there was a kid, I would have said the F word, but at this moment, it was a ratings issue. I wanted to make my fantasy movies PG, so kids like me could see them. Now, back to the fire, I didn't know what to do. All I knew was stop, drop, and roll. But that's only good when you are on fire, right? No one ever tells you how to put a fire out. So I did the only thing I could do. I ran inside to the cabin, and I got a cup of water. When I reached the room, Jennifer was back sitting on the bed, and I was just out of breath and freaked out. And when I saw her, I tried to act calm. Hey, what's up? Nothing, What'd you do today? Oh, nothing. Just, I walked around. Walking around. You want to watch MTV with me? Yeah, sure. I'm thirsty though. I'm just gonna go get some water. I ran to the bathroom. I grabbed a cup that was so small it was more like a thimble, and I filled it with water. And I ran back outside where the fire now was spreading. Now every second it was getting closer and closer to the cabin. But no worries, I was gonna put it out with my dollop of water, and I threw that on the flame, and nothing happened. That's right. I needed a new plan fast, but unfortunately, I didn't have one. So what did I do? I ran back inside to get more water. Now, did I run past the fire alarm? Yes, I did. Could I have pulled it? Yes, I did. But did not do that, right? I re-entered the room, and I just tried to continue to act casual as Jennifer intently watched MTV. Do you like this song? Is that the song from Family Ties? Yeah, Mike and the Mechanics. No, I think it's Billy Vera. No, I think it's Mike and the Mechanics. So you wait till the end when they put the thing up, it's going to be Billy Vera. No, it's Mike and the Mechanics. Wait, oh no, fire. I'm thirsty, I yelled, and I ran back to the bathroom. I got 2 glasses this time. I returned to the blaze, and now the fire had spread to the back cabin wall. I tossed those 2 cups of water into the blaze, and nothing. And now I was in a full-on panic. But if something doesn't work twice, it will definitely work a 3rd time. I went back into the bathroom, and before I could get there, Jennifer stopped me. Noticing my red face and very heavy breathing, she knew something was up. What are you doing? As she rose to ask the question, she stood directly in front of the back cabin window where the flames had now risen so much they silhouetted her body, right? And I pointed outside. She turned, and I watched a look of shock and horror register on her face. And I shouted, there's a fire, and I didn't start it. Which is definitely something an innocent person would have said. So we ran back outside to see this blaze creeping up the back wall of the cabin. And we stood there just frozen, too young to know how to deal with this. And I just blurted out again, I didn't do it. I just found it. Get your mom. And I go, I didn't do it. Just get help. And I started to run, but then I froze. I looked at my watch. Then I looked at Jennifer. It's not 5 o'clock. Who cares? I go back. So I ran to my mom's room. I banged on the door. No one answered. I banged again. Still no answer. I kept on furiously knocking until the door opened. And it was my mom. And she was in a bathrobe. And behind her, there was Hunter. And he was in a bathrobe. And there was a bottle of caviar and champagne on the bed. Clearly, I was interrupting some sort of afternoon delight. And again, I don't want to think about this. And more importantly, my mom doesn't want you to think about that. So seeing me stand there, her face fell. What is it? I'm like, I found a fire and it won't go out. Now, I found a fire seemed to be the best tactic. It kind of put me in a heroic position, making me like a human lassie. I just knew I couldn't go down for this. I mean, the punishment for this crime would be huge. Now, Mom and Hunter ran out in their bathrobes to witness the flames racing up the entire back wall of the cabin. Smoke was billowing as other guests started to come out of their cabins. Ooh, s'mores? And I just kept on broadcasting my lie to whoever would listen. until a Rocking Horse Ranch representative rode up on horseback. Of course, they fucking love their horses. And people just kept on arriving onto the scene. What happened? Someone asked. Now, I just wanted to kind of sneak into the background, but my mom pointed at me and goes, he found it. He found a fire. And Jennifer tried to pull me back into our room, but a Rocking Horse Ranch stopped us. He had some questions. Damn, I was the criminal and the witness. This is going to be tough. Thankfully, I had a lot of experience playing multiple roles. Now, the fire truck appeared, and the firefighters got to work hosing down the back of the cabin. The flames, they went out quickly. The damage seemed to be only cosmetic, and the lead firefighter approached me and asked me to follow him. And I walked about 50 feet away from my mom and Hunter, and the firefighter sat me on the truck and circled me, blocking my view of everything past them. Now, luckily, like I said, I was, conducted and had been subjected to many interrogations as Lance and other assorted criminals. So I knew how to act, or at least I thought I did. But being surrounded by a bunch of actually tall men firing questions at me really made me feel smaller than ever. I mean, I knew I had done all of this. And if they found out, I was going to go to jail. I mean, as a child, going to jail was very real for me. In the short time I had spent with Hunter, he often attached the threat of going to jail to the smallest things. If you don't hang up your coat, you're going to go to jail. Now, if you don't wash your plate in the sink, you're going to go to jail. He said it so frequently, presenting it as an eventuality rather than a possibility, that I was convinced that there was a jail for kids who misbehave. And to make matters worse, Hunter didn't stop at telling me I'd be going to jail. He would explain what would happen to me when I was there. He would describe how not only would I be locked away from my friends and family, but I'd also be raped on a daily basis. Yes, raped. And I don't really even know what sex was as an 8-year-old, let alone rape. And my mind just created these vivid pictures, not unlike rape. But at that age, the idea was even more horrifying because I couldn't comprehend it. I mean, if I could go to jail for not picking up my coat, starting a fire was way worse. I was committing a crime. I was done for. I was moments away from going to jail and being raped for the rest of my life. And I was scared. There's only one thing I could do. Keep lying. That's right. And commit even harder to it. And these firefighters kept on pressing me about what I had seen. And I just kept on repeating the same story. I was wandering around out back and I found a fire. I knew I needed to give them more. So I started suggesting other ways it could have started. Maybe the sun was so bright that it bounced off the window and it kind of worked like a magnifying glass. No takers on that one? Okay. And then I went with what I knew. Maybe someone accidentally threw a cigarette out there. Now, the cigarette theory caught the firefighters' interest. So I offered to look around the crime scene for any evidence I could find. Always want to be helpful. And I searched frantically until I found a piece of the cigarette filter right where I had thrown it, right where the fire had started. And I looked up, hey, I found it. And I ran over to the firefighters. Someone must have been smoking and they must have accidentally started the fire. Now, you just notice I used the term accidentally because even though I was blaming a fictional person, I didn't really want anyone to go to jail and get raped. Now, one of the firefighters approached me and asked me, did you start this fire? Now, the conviction in his voice sent me into momentary shock. I stumbled and bubbled. What? No, I found it. And he looked at me again. Empty your pockets. And I did. And I pulled out the matches from the hotel. He had me. Was it your cigarette? Were you the one that was smoking out here? Now, first, I want to tell you, I was insulted by that accusation. No, I was not smoking. Little did he know, the actual truth of why I had the cigarette in the first place was way more embarrassing. But he didn't believe me. Just tell me the truth. You won't have to leave early and go home, do you? I mean, the answer to that was yes, I did want to go home. But I stood firm and I told the biggest lie of the day. No, I love it here. I swear, I found it. And we just stared at each other. I don't know if he bought it, but I wasn't going to change my story, and I just held firm. And then from somewhere behind me, I heard Jennifer say, he couldn't have started it. He was inside watching TV with me. Instant alibi. I mean, I was saved. This firefighter knew we were deadlocked, and he just looked to the ground and shook his head and whispered under his breath, just be careful, and walked off. Jennifer put her arm around me and gave me this big smile. My big sister had saved me. Now, we never really talked about what happened or what was going through her mind in that moment as she stepped in and protected me. But decades later, as a parent of 2 sons who are often at each other's throats, I've noticed that when stuff gets real, they have each other's back. And as an only child, I didn't know how much I craved that support and protection that comes from a sibling. And as my life at home with Hunter grew more and more fraught in the years that followed, this protection was something I really needed. Unfortunately, Jennifer stayed with us only for about 9 months, but in that short period of time, I had a sibling, and one who saved me from being horribly raped in jail. And for that, I'm forever grateful. There you go. Thank you. Thanks so much. Thank you so much. I am so excited because this person is a very big part in my life because she is a partner with my wife. They do an amazing podcast called Deep Dive, the Deep Dive Academy. She's also a fantastic actress and a comedian. You've seen her on shows like Playing House. Please welcome Jessica Sinclair. Is this comfortable for you guys?
I love it.
Oh, okay.
Thank you so much, Paul. I'm so glad you guys got to hear this. Show of hands, who has read the book already?
Okay, good.
Okay, good. Okay, good. So you know what we're talking about. So I'll start this out by saying Paul is one of my very favorite people.
Oh my gosh.
He is the person in our group of friends. We joke, we say Paul takes care of us because Paul is the guy, he's like everyone's dad. Paul is the guy who, if you need a charging cable, if you need
It's a very
get your gutters cleaned, Paul is the guy who knows how to do it.
I'm the guy who has a guy, or
He
I have
always
a cable.
has a guy, exactly. And what I found so wonderful and surprising when I read the book is I've known Paul since I was maybe 23 years old.
Yeah.
And I would have had no idea of what Paul went through as a child. And I think in so many ways it's a testament to Paul's survival skills and also the way he looks at life, because Paul is one of the most optimistic and joyful people I have ever met. And so to read what he'd gone through, I was, of course, I was so moved and horrified by what he'd gone through, but also it made me appreciate Paul even more for what he's done in terms of taking life circumstances and deciding he was going to have a different type of life when he got older. He's also an incredible father and friend. So I will just say,
well, you love this.
It's a wonderful story. I'm sure you guys know that too. It's one thing when people are born into a life that's like, oh, and I had the perfect family, and then things continued to be great, and I had all this generational wealth. I could just buy a house like in Santa Monica. It's been great.
We summered in Nantucket. We wintered in Colorado.
Right. And believe me, I'll read those memoirs.
But it's funny. It's funny you say this because it's like I also. Like this joyful recollection of the trauma, the title of it, it really, like, people are like, well, but it is dramatic, but it also is all mixed together. Because I don't think I ever really assumed this thing. Like I was talking to somebody the other day when I was releasing the book. I was like, oh yeah, I grew up in this house. You guys see what my house looked like. And I showed it to somebody and she's like, oh, you grew up in a trailer park. And I was like, oh no, I didn't. And then I looked at it, I was like, oh, I get that. It wasn't like an insult, but it was like, I didn't realize that like we grew up in this it was just like, that's what it was. And I think that like, you don't like, I feel like the eye of like being discerning about what you're getting is, kids don't have that. They just know what they have.
This is all you have.
Yeah.
Right? This is your reality. But I wonder, Paul, what it was like to look back and to write these stories, because I think something about comedians that's very weird is when terrible things are happening to us, half of us, or maybe 3/4 of us, is like, this is gonna make a great story. Even when I got diagnosed with cancer, and I was like, this is gonna be funny. What's happening here is funny. And my partner, my other writing partner, was like, you're a psychopath. But, so when you were a child and some of these things were going, was there a part of you that knew that there were also absurd things happening?
No, absolutely not. No, because I didn't really talk about it. We were not like told to talk about this. It was like, there are certain things in our lives that were kept, like my mom was very intent in not letting anyone know that she was even divorced. It was like, so it was like, that was even a shame, a great shame, even like, I remember, and it sounds so, it feels like I was like in the time of covered wagons, but like, I was the only person that had a divorced parent in my classroom and stuff like that, now it's, I mean, I'm watching parents get divorced mid-year,
Yeah.
but
And they're best friends by spring break. They're still vacationing together.
So it's like, we kept a lot of that stuff in. And I think whenever I did talk about it, I could see how people like disconnected from it. I'd been doing this podcast, How Did This Get Made, for like 14 years. I love this show. And these stories would come out, and I would always make sure that whenever I told these stories, I was like, oh, I'll leave out all these other details, because the core of it is still funny. But the reasons for the core, are a little darker, because you can kind of feel, I was describing this the other day, like people's like butthole clench a little bit, like, I want to get in there, I'm beat up hunter. I'm like, well, I don't need you to do that. Or like, oh, I'm so mad. I'm like, and it becomes like, then I start to feel like, oh, then I'm holding back because I don't want you, like, I just want to tell you a story, but I don't want you to feel like you have to fix me. And so then you just start to like whittle all that stuff down, and it's like you create this other reality that's a little bit more palatable, it's a little more acceptable. And I think what I've tried to do in the book is find that balance of like going, well, here's the funny stuff, but there's also some real stuff, and you can go back and forth between it, because that's, to me, what life is to a certain degree. It's like it's dark and light.
Well, yeah, where I remember when I was having a particularly hard time in my life, I talked to this meditation teacher, and I was like, this is some heavy shit. And she said, well, without dark, there can't be light.
Right.
And so, and that's what I think is so incredible about this book, because you're laughing hysterically, and then the next line is like, hits you like a gut punch, and you're crying. But that's a really masterful thing that you've done here. And I am really impressed. But what I'm most impressed about is the courage it takes to write something like this.
I appreciate you saying that. And it's funny because I don't think I can, I don't think I accept that. Like people say, like, I just had a phone call with a friend the other day, and he's like, oh, I'm so, like, wow. Like, that's, this book really is a reflection of like work that I have done. Like, this is not the first time I'm talking about it.
Right.
And I think that that's good, because in a way, I'm able to look at it in a different way. I'm able to like dissect it. I'm able to actually share it, because one of the things that's so kind of crazy about it is once you release it into the world, it's not yours anymore to a certain degree. And so I didn't even view it as brave at this point. I was like, oh, I am now ready to share this, because I can't be affected by anyone's interpretation of it. Now, well, we were streaming, so I can't tell you who, but when the stream ends, I'll tell you.
Really touch the dirt.
But one of the first interviews I ever did for this book, the first question out of the gate, was, and it was like, this is not like a Bobo podcast. It's like a bigger person. And she was like, well, let me tell you this. My family was very competitive playing games, but I never got choked out when I played Monopoly. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, it was like, I was like, that's where we're starting, right? And it's coming in on such a high thing. And I'm like, I know, right? I mean, well, that's what you get when you buy Boardwalk. Because I'm like, well, I'll match you up here. But I could only do that if I was okay with it. But if I'm like sharing something that was like raw, I mean, it's a moment, but I'm also like, it's dealt with, I'm at peace with it. So if you want to come at me, and believe me, people say crazy things here, and I would say that's 5%, and 95% has been wonderful, amazing things. But I couldn't imagine what I would be like if I was at all like processing it. Yeah.
And I think there is something to writing about it that helps you process it.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. Because I think the end part of this process was like looking at it from like the like this macro view, and I was like, oh wow, like, oh, this all ties together. You can see some connections that you may not see, because it's like it's all in one place, or at least this part of my story is all in one place. And I was able to kind of see stuff, and it definitely helped. But I also feel like, and I don't want to, like, it's like, I think it's important for everyone to share their own stories, because no matter what, like, you may not have the similar situation with me, but you can relate to it. I talk about this Paris Hilton book all the time that I read, because Paris and I were like this, and
she's always
yeah,
over.
she's always there.
She's always asking for a gutter guy.
Yeah, and I'm like, I got it. You need a USB-C cable? You got it, Paris. I'll get you. But she writes in her book about going to this crazy reform school where kids were getting killed.
Yes.
And that's something I can't relate to. That. I didn't go to reform school, but there's something in it that sharing that story can trigger my own thing. And I feel like that's the important thing that we do. It's not about write a book, not write a book. It's not about putting it in book form, but it's sharing these stories, connecting with people is so important. And I feel like I'll just do one more tangent on this and say and one of the things I worry about sometimes with kids, or my kids in particular, is I want them to watch movies and connect with that because it teaches you empathy. I think things like that teach you empathy. They connect you to stuff. And it's and I'm no offense to YouTube. I'll watch a Mr. Beast video any day. But it's also when you see a movie that actually affects them. My son's been watching Creed. Oh man, he gets upset when Creed is being, he's I watch him get worked up about it. And it's that's important. It's important to activate these things in us. And I think that sometimes we're so on the surface, we don't get there. And whatever. I have somebody who embraces and loves social media and all the stuff, 90-second videos. I also think it's also important. It's something that we all need to do is have full, rich conversations about what we think, what we feel, whether it's politics or our life, whatever it is, and have conversations. And so that's
right. And I think that there's something about, I think you were talking about before, how you left out versions, parts of the story that would be too upsetting to people. Because there's a way in which you don't want to feel like an alien, if ever you have, we all have this feeling, right, that everybody else had this perfect childhood and that we were the only freaks, right? So then I wonder, because when I ended up I kept the fact I had breast cancer for a long time because I felt like nobody would be able to laugh at me after I told,
Yeah.
And so even the night before the show that I wrote, the season I wrote about it, I was like, I don't know if this was a good idea. And my partner said, well, that ship has sailed.
Right. Yeah.
It's about to air. But what was so fascinating is that actually in sharing our vulnerability, we get so much closer to each other. And I actually felt the opposite was true, as people identified with me more. And then in their sharing their stories with me, and I wondered if people have come up to you and shared their stories, I felt so much less alone. And then it's we're all winning.
Yeah, I feel like people I've known for years have shared with me things that I've never had conversations about, because they felt okay to share it. And I think what the hard thing to do, and I think the thing I'm trying to learn as a human being, is just listening without trying to fix, listening without just listening, without not even judgment. The way I guess it is without judgment. It's I'm just hearing your thing. I don't have to do anything more than just be a listener. And I think that sometimes that is a hard thing to do because you're oh, you're telling me this. Okay, are you okay? What can I do? It's but sometimes you just want to talk. And I feel and part of the thing about this book that I loved, or what I liked about writing it, is that I could tell a story the way I wanted to without adapting to how you're responding to it.
Right. You don't have to see the person hearing the story.
Yeah. And that to me is important. I think that's it's a small distinction sometimes too, because it's that's what pulls me back in. And I'm afraid if I say this or if I don't know this, and and certain people take different things from it, and that's great. I love that people can come to me and be oh, this is my favorite part. That's my favorite part. But it allowed me to, I think the only way I could get this out without feeling oh no, I have to make it okay for the listener. That's my own thing. And I think that's hard, sometimes.
Tell me about, so what I think there was a really beautiful passage, and of course, if I didn't have ADHD,
no, I
would have.
I'll tell you where it is. I've read it a bunch.
But about when people ask you, how could you forgive?
Oh, yeah.
How could you forgive some of the people in your life that failed you, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think
we're
very
obsessed
easily
with forgiveness, by the way.
Yeah.
In America, we love it.
We love it.
We love for you to apologize.
Pop them up, pull them down, pop them back up again.
Yeah, but how do you?
I never really I think it's a joyful recollections of trauma part of it. It's I I don't have a grudge to this guy Hunter. He's an abusive man that I lived with. A lot of crazy stuff happened, but there's no like want for me. Like, I'm gonna go find him and talk to him. Now, did I find out where he lived before I wrote the book? Make sure he was alive. Well, not make sure. Check if he was alive. I did. I knew where he was. Mentally, I just needed that, but it wasn't gonna stop me from doing it. I just wanted to understand it. But I have no desire to be like, I'll go to his house and I'm gonna give him a what. No. It's like that was this moment. It was there. And as far as like my parents and stuff like that, I never really faulted them because they did love me. I felt love. It's like they may not know how to do everything perfectly. I think when I became a parent, I got an empathy that I probably even respected them or I understood them even more. It's like you're trying to do your best and you only have what you have available to you. Like I think about what I do with my kids in camp. Like today, my kids are in 2 different camps. We're going around. Like I'm putting addresses into a GPS. My parents didn't have internet or GPS. They're getting from place to place. They can't go online and Google like what happened here. And the truth is like it wasn't like my parents failed me and that was it. It was like, Child Protective Services called to my house. They didn't help. The therapist was called. They didn't. We went to therapy. It's like we had all these, relatives across the board. And it's not like they were like, deal with it. I don't know if people even
Understood
knew
it.
or what to do. And I think and I think you have to be fair with that. Like, I think it's, and I think that like, we're not defined by an action, but we're defined by like who we become too. It's like the things I did at 20 versus 25 versus 30. And now I'm only 31, but
You've done so much.
So much. But
I would say we met at 23. He was 12.
Yeah. But like those are like I know that I'm growing and changing too.
Yeah.
It's like I'm not that same. I just feel like.
And when you were writing this, did you feel that you had more understanding and empathy for them while you were writing it? Or did it feel like some anger came up?
I felt like some anger. It allowed myself to like at least look at it in a black and white way and say, I see this thing. And there's one thing like with my dad. My dad was who I love so much, and he's an amazing guy. He could never, like, whenever I would talk about it with him, he would be the guy who'd be like, well, I thought someone else was handling it. I didn't know. I didn't this. I didn't that. And that always bugged me. And I talked to him. Everything I said to him, it's in this book. Yeah. So I felt okay writing it because it wasn't like, Dad, read this book. He's like, oh, you never said this. I did. Yeah, right. And I couldn't ever get past it. Like he couldn't connect to it. And so I think I was able to articulate that in a way. It's like, what do I want him to say? What do I want him to do? Why is it bothering me? So I was able to like wrestle with that. That was actually important because it was like, I knew I needed something. I didn't know exactly what. And I think when I was looking at them, I definitely have empathy for him, but I also had some anger too. And and I think actually from the release of this book, because I only let him read it 2 weeks before it came out. Because it was like part of me was like, I don't want them to dictate what it was in there. We've started to be able to talk a little bit more honestly about things. And I think of like, so it is important. It's like, but I don't know if I could have done that before. I don't know if I could have done that before.
Yeah. I think you tell the story when it's ready to come out.
Well, that's it. Like, and I really do feel like I couldn't have written this book before having kids, and not because I think it is dealing a lot about what I went through as a child, right? Yeah. So once I start to see my children as these vulnerable people who will believe anything that you tell them, and that look to you for safety and protection, I see how vulnerable a child is. I also see how, at points, I'm scared as a parent, and I'm trying to help, and
sometimes making the wrong choice.
100%.
You know what? I read a statistic that good parents make the wrong decision 70% of the time. And I said to a friend of mine, I'm like, that's a lot. And my friend goes, actually, that's a great batting average. If that's at 300, you're batting at 300. And I was like, okay.
Yeah, somebody once told me, like, with acting, it's like, if you book like 10% of the jobs you audition for, that's like a giant ratio. It's like, and I do think it's like that with a kid is like, you're trying and you're learning with them. And I think what I've really tried to do and what I've tried to bring into my being a parent is just like apologizing, like being there, knowing I made a mistake, and I don't try to like double down on it. I just kind of be like, I messed that one up. Yeah. And it's okay. And if I apologize and they can apologize, and they don't see any like heavy with, it's like I don't expect much of them. or I do expect, I don't expect them to feel like they can't act in a certain way.
Yeah, and I think that I used to think that the only people who could have become perfect parents were the ones who had perfect parents. Because I thought, well,
Right.
how would you learn how to be a good parent if you didn't model it?
Yeah.
And I remember a therapist saying to me, actually, some of the people who have had the hardest things in childhood turn into the best parents because they're always thinking what they
Yeah.
wished they could have had.
I think that's true. I mean, I think that's true. I also think it's like just being in touch with your kids and not like I think this idea of like I can be a parent. I don't have to be. I mean, I'm their friend, but I'm their parent first. And it's like, and just being okay with like sometimes they'll be mad at me, sometimes they won't, sometimes like
right.
It's like, and I feel like really listen again. It's listening. It's like, what are they actually saying? I talk about like I know we have 2 questions. The one thing that I always think about with my kids is like what I'm scared of and what they're scared of is very different things. And I don't always know where they're scared until they tell me. So I try not to put words in their mouth. And that's been really important to me to kind of just hear what they are thinking about, because it's like, I want to be there to solve their problems, not like make me feel better about what I think they're going through.
That's right. I also think this book is a portrait of the 80s, and it's shocking that any of us survived.
Oh my gosh.
Like literally. I mean, I think somebody told me too that there's a bigger gap. So like our parents and our grandparents were much closer in the way they parented, right? And then there's a humongous gap between the boomers and our generation, how we parent. And when I read this, I'm like, all of the chances that you could have been killed.
Oh, absolutely.
That story, there's the story where he gets chased home from a 7-Eleven.
Yeah.
Where I'm like,
adults, like multiple adults.
But like all of us who grew up in the 80s, like I'm like, yeah, I could have died here, and here. Because we were free range.
Yeah, well, it's like latchkey kid. Like I don't know everyone's a latchkey kid. Yeah, it's like, you just come home and you wait. Yeah.
Looking for food.
Don't turn that stove on too high. I mean, I was cooking stuff. I don't know what I was doing. Yeah.
Don't open the door. Like we were the latchkey generation.
Yeah.
So
that was it.
So I actually think there's you could, even though it's not as extreme, maybe the experiences you had as a child in the 80s, I still think you will be reminded of times you could have died.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And then happy you survived.
Yeah. That's it. That's a joyful recollection.
And happy you survived.
Let's see. If anyone has any questions, and then we'll do a quick signing or whatever, or not quick. I'll stay until everybody. But it's based on the amount of people here, it's not gonna be like that long. But,
yes.
Yeah. No, I kind of only could describe that he didn't drink. The question was, did Hunter drink? He did not drink, but it felt like the most appropriate way to describe him, because it was like I never knew what I was going to get.
Yeah.
I didn't know what that do. It was happy, angry,
like a rageaholic.
Yeah.
Almost. Yeah.
And it just was that tenuous, based on nothing, and that, and when I've talked to people who have alcoholic people in their lives, family, it's the closest that I've ever felt to understanding what he had. Apparently, though, I just read Barbara Streisand's book. She's like that too. Apparently, that's what she says by her own admission.
I think some of the funny stuff I've heard on How Did This Get Made is when you bring up some anecdote from your childhood, and it seems like there's like a moment where your co-hosts are like,
like what the hell? Yeah.
I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about an experience like that, and maybe you could talk about how this your childhood has kind of impacted your art.
I think that my childhood impacted my art because I was alone all the time. So I play by myself. So that's essentially like writing, creating, doing, right? Like, so there's some connection to improv there. There's like play. There's like the sense of make believe and fun is definitely there. I mean, when June read this book, my wife, she was like surprised by things in it, because I'm like, oh, I didn't talk about it. And then somebody was like, somebody recently on X wrote like, they're like, oh, here's my list of stories that you've told on How This Get Made. I'm like, oh, I wish I had this when I was writing this book. I didn't even think about these stories. I mean, that's the other thing. I don't remember them. It's not like, oh yeah, well, these are the 10 stories I came. I was like, you'd write, and then I'm like, oh, that leads into this, and that. It was very organic. But yeah, I'm surprised by the stories. Sometimes like, oh, I forgot about that. Like I was telling a story on the podcast towards the end of the book. I was like, oh, I got to put that in the book. Like when I went to go to New York City to see like a naked person, specifically a naked woman. But
The
but
thing
yeah.
I always tell about Paul is like, because
You've been there when I've done these stories,
yes,
right? Yeah.
I have been a part of them, and I've been horrified. You know, like Paul tells them, and we're just like, "Oh my God, Paul, that's so dark." We just like, and that's nice when your friends instead of have empathy, they make fun of you.
No, I take it. I love it.
Keep bringing it back up.
But I never think of it like that's the problem. I don't understand when I go too dark. I have to fall back.
I know. I have a husband similarly. But I also, with people ask me about who Paul is, I'm like, you have to understand that Paul. How old were you when you charged $5 to watch Lethal Weapon?
Oh yeah, that's not in the book. I want to talk to you about this because I just recently rewatched Beverly Hills Cop pilot that you're in, and you got to do scene with Axel Foley. But I was charging people to watch Beverly Hills Cop when I was in 6th grade. We went on a field trip to Washington D.C. and I created my own pay-per-view theater where in my hotel room where $5 to get in and you could watch Beverly Hills Cop. And I made a lot of money. It was great.
That's the thing you have to understand. This guy, I always say, like in the gold rush, you had people who would go and pan.
Yeah.
This guy's out there before anyone shows up. He's selling the pants. Do you know
what
I mean?
I was ready to go. I mean, look,
Paul's
it was like everyone's on beds watching. We're all on beds watching Beverly Hills Cop 2, which was a good coup. It was great.
Who else?
Yep. First of all, big fan. Dealer's choice. What was the easiest part, or what was the hardest part for you to write?
Ooh, that's a good one.
I think the hardest part for me was protecting my parents. Yeah. My parents are alive. I love my parents. They're amazing. Lovely. How can I be truthful, but also be respectful of what they are doing? And I know that, you're talking about this generation gap. Mm-hmm. Their friends are going to be petty, right? Regardless of whether or not they shared or not, they'll be like, "Oh, did you see what Gail did? Bill, And I felt really like I need to make sure I protect that. And so that went through different levels because there may be moments when I was like, oh, I'm mad, and I'd ramp it up a little bit and I pull it back down, and I want to tell the truth, but I'm like, the truth is like, this is my story. They are characters in it. I'm not here to tell you what they went through, what their life is. I'm not trying to tell their story. I'm talking about them through my eyes as what I saw without everything that I know. Right. And now, to a certain degree, it's a hard thing to kind of it's a needle to thread, but I really kept on going back through to make sure that it was truthful to me. I didn't want to pull away from it, but also I could look at them in the eye and be like, I did you right. Like I did you,
I think the thing that I really loved about the way you spoke about your parents is that at no point in this book did I question that your parents loved you very deeply.
Yeah.
And I think that much can be forgiven when there's love there, because they didn't mean the things that happened were not something they were like, oh, we're going to go out. Yeah,
they just didn't have the tools to do it.
That's right. And
you hope that everybody has that amount of forgiveness. And I think it's so easy to judge, like, oh, you should have. Oh, if I was there. But there were people there. This didn't happen in a vacuum. Yeah. There were people who missed and didn't. And it's like, it's so easy to step outside of it. Like, and I think that you see that all the time. It's like, yeah.
Can you tell me, I'm sorry, I know, I just want you to speak to the chapter about the Hulk.
Oh, yeah.
Because that moment in your life where you chose to not fight anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, I was on a plane just like weeping. Those moments are so defining in our life, right? Can you just explain for those people who haven't read the book yet?
In being in this violent household, I started to learn as I got older that the best way I could kind of have my power back was through violence. And that was, I was like, oh, I don't have to be a victim. I can fight back. But when that happens, that also means that it comes at you harder. But then that would start to leak into my everyday. Like, so if some kid at school did something, it was like I went from 0 to 100, and then all of a sudden, like, I have this image. I don't know if it's in the book, but it probably isn't because it's too dark. But it's I remember getting into a fight with a kid in the schoolyard and just taking his face and just slamming it into a car fender. And it's like, oh, like, but this is how I have to stop this kid. Way more violent. I mean, he was my age. It wasn't, but it was like, I'm like, oh, this is it. But
You're
that's
in a
why
mafia movie all of a sudden.
right.
Yeah.
And it's like, but that was like, but I didn't stop. Like I didn't know how to stop. And I actually like that moment with the car fender was like one of the moments where I was like, oof, what am I doing? Like, and it just started to make me think about it. And then one of these days, I would get into fights, a lot of fights, and then this kid came over my house to fight me, like a formal, like a Sunday afternoon. Knock, knock, knock. Please step outside. Let's fight. And it was Long Island, so it's not
really
abnormal.
Evolved much since Bridgerton days.
No.
Meet me at dawn. We ride at dawn.
And thank God they weren't pistols. Know. And yes, we went out, and as we're walking there, I'm like, what am I doing? Because I've been out of this abusive relationship for years, but that was the way that I fought. I didn't know any other way. My anger was still there. It was unresolved. It was undealt with, and I had to like check. I remember like having this moment. I'm walking to my backyard, and it just like something flashed where I'm like, oh, I am becoming Hunter. I am this guy. I am this violent guy who would come home with a broken arm, who would come home with a black eye. What happened? Oh, I fell off a crate. And again, as a kid, I'm not asking questions. I'm like, oh yeah, you fell off a crate. How do you get a black guy from falling off a crate? I don't know. But it's like, and why are you on a crate? You're a truck driver. It's like, and that was this moment. And I was like, okay, I'm going to change it. But I didn't know how to change it. So I just shut it off. And I think it took me a long time. I think part of the second half of this book is what are those effects of living through that, getting out of it, feeling good and feeling like I had a good childhood, but at the same time, what are the effects of this stuff? And how do you kind of start to, I don't think even polish them out, but like kind of polish them in, like, or like, it's a part of me, but I have to acknowledge that I have these, I'm trying to make an analogy I haven't really thought through, but I would say it is a part of me. I don't have to get rid of it. I don't have to not talk about it. But it is also something I have to manage and kind of wrap my head around. And once I was able to embrace it and look at it in a real way, I was able to let that anger go and not just be like, I'm not angry. I will never be angry. I'll be like, and I was very passive for a long time. Oh, just you want to go there? Great, I'll go there. It's like I was so people pleaser. And then it was like, and then now I'm like, I can be who I am. I can have anger. I can get into fights, not physical fights, but I can get into, I have levels now, and I think it's a difference between it's like a knob on an amp. It can go to 10, but it also can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
That's a beautiful. Yeah, that chapter is so beautiful and was so inspiring to me because I'm like, oh right, we all have those moments in our life where we can make this choice or this choice.
Yeah, and maybe and the other thing too is like you can make that choice multiple times. Like if you miss that exit once.
That exit will keep coming around.
Until you acknowledge it. And it was like, and it did, and that's the thing. It's like, and even when I was trying to do it, I was like, I'm holding it back, and then something would happen. Something on the subway happens, and I'm like, all of a sudden fighting with this guy in a subway. I'm like, what the fuck am I doing? This is not good. This is not high school. This is not, safe on some level. This is like, I'm in, I'm just getting to a fight about dumb shit, and like, So, any other questions? And then we go,
was there anything that you read or watched that helped draw inspiration while you were writing the book?
I listened to a lot of memoirs, and read a lot of memoirs. One of the things that really was active about this entire time was like, how can I be truthful that it's important and not just like just disposable, if that makes sense. Like I've read a lot of things that I'm like that have really impacted me and really moved me, and it was like, it's not my story, but it's like, what about that story is moving to me. And it is like those things like the Paris Hilton thing, or it's like it's reading I think that freed me to go like, they reminded me of the goal, which was like, but you have to go deeper, but yes, you have to do this. Like the book Heavy, which I loved, and I'm just forgetting her name who wrote it, I was like, oh, like I'm like there are just things in there. It's just like when it can kind of get you, and I just wanted to hopefully get those moments. That was the most important thing.
So that book was called Heavy?
I think it was called that. But I'll Google it. No, you know what? I'll tell you what it is called. I'm so sorry. Now I'm gonna forget it. I think it was, I'll tell you. I'll make sure I figure it out. That's why I'm terrible. I have to have like notes of my own books that I've read. But yeah, but I don't want to keep everybody here
There's
too.
just
Yeah.
one more.
Okay, great. Yeah.
One more over here.
What advice would you have for someone who has control of the dial or who is
Yeah.
ready to have joyful discussions about their trauma?
Not ready or is ready? No,
Is ready.
is ready. I mean, then you're great. Like, you know, like, I mean, like in a good way. Like, I think that like, it's like, if you have that control of the dial, like I've had the control of the dial for a long time too. I don't know. For me, this is like a final step, not of me as a person, but this kind of journey. So it was really nice to look back and reflect and acknowledge the work that I've done, where I want to go. It has to help realign me. I do think it's like what we were saying before, just being able to have that conversation, seeing something. Like I talked to a family friend the other day. And she said, "Can you talk to my son? He's fighting a lot." And I was like, "Oh, it's weird though, because he's 12. I'm gonna call him up, and you don't know me. Like if I knew him, I'd be like, hey, I'm your friend of your mom. Why are you fighting? Like, you know, but what I did do was I called him up and just started having a conversation with him about anything. So maybe if it continues, at one point I can help, like I can be an ally. Like I'm not here to like reprimand. I'm not here to you need to have a connection with me. I feel like that's important. Like I've talked to people like you and I have talked about ADHD stuff. Like I never talked about that until I put that in this book. I was embarrassed by that. Like it's like, but once you find those people and you see, oh, you have it, oh, I'm gonna share something with you, or we can talk about it. Like it's almost like finding those safe spaces. Like now, because I have the book, everyone can come up to me and be like, oh, I can tell you my thing, and it's great. It's like it's easy for me because I've put it out now. You can tell me, and it's I don't have to do any of that guesswork. But I think it's important to like, if you listen, you can like lean in a little bit more, and you can help people, and you can kind of subtly bring it to them. I think you know. Yeah.
So with the platform that you have,
Yeah.
I noticed that you could have written about anything. Like it
Yeah.
could have been like personal development or like how to build a successful
Yeah.
podcast, and you chose a memoir. So
Yeah.
I guess how did you come to that decision?
I've never had that question before, and I think it's a good question because I think people wanted different things from me when I went out. A lot of people, like when you have like the podcast or actor or whatever it is, like you just go out and sell a book and then you're like, I'll write it later. And I was very much not wanting to do that because it seemed too scary. And my thought was, I have to know what I want to write about first. So I just started writing. I didn't have a book agent. I didn't have anything. I was like, I'm just going to write. And this is what came out. And so then when I got a book agent, we talked, and he's like, more here and less this. Because I did still have things. I'm like, well, here's crazy Christmas gifts my mom gave me, and here's some movies, and and they're like, no, get rid of that. Come over here. And then when I met with the book people, everyone had a very different point of view. Like some people were like, I want a book about just you and your mom. That's it. No June, no kids, no anything. And I love that guy. He was an amazing guy. But I was like, I don't know if I feel like I want to write that book. And then somebody was like, I want you to write more of a pop culture thing. And I want and some people I think also were afraid of it too. They were like, I don't want that from you. And then when I met with the people from Harper, they were like, no, I like this. And as a matter of fact, you don't even see what you're doing, but I can go even more to this thing. And that was without I realized that I think we agreed on it, but I knew what I was writing. So it wasn't like I had to sit down there and should I write a pop culture book? Should I write a memoir? Should I write this? It was organic, and it was a good partnership. And I think that's like, it's hard. It's hard to sell a book. It's hard to literally then once you sell a book, then to actually sell a book. It's all these things that are hard. So you have to really be committed to what you're wanting to do. And I'm very happy that I went this route because it's more fulfilling to me. It's not like, this is my book of the top 50 craziest movies of all time, and it's like.
I mean, he will publish that.
By the way, book 2, but
I'm panning for gold. He's selling me the pen.
But that was like,
Trust
but to
and
me,
believe.
but there was some, come in.
Honey, it'll be there.
But I think it's like what I think has been so amazing is like real conversations. Something like I'm so thrilled that if you're here because you listen to the podcast, if you're here because you like me from whatever I've done, and
Maybe they're here for me.
maybe they're here for you. By the way,
Maybe they're here for me.
100%. I still want to ask you about Axel Foley. I want to talk about that in great detail. I literally jumped up because I watched it.
Story. There's a fake Eddie Murphy and a real Eddie
Oh,
Murphy.
I know about
Did you know
that. 3 Eddie Murphys. I worked with 3.
Okay. That's a whole nother book. Eddie Murphy has a man who comes and travels the world with him, who looks exactly like him.
So much so that when I was getting lunch on set, I was like, oh shit, Eddie Murphy's like on the craft services line. And I was like, oh, you're fake Eddie Murphy. Like it's like Eddie Murphy to here. It's like but that person.
I was rehearsing the scene with who I thought was real Eddie Murphy, and then I looked to my left and I saw real Eddie Murphy peeking from the shadows, watching me with fake Eddie Murphy. And then I'm on the passenger van. Again, this isn't about me, but I'm on the passenger van. I think I'm with fake Eddie Murphy, obviously.
Yeah, why is he in the passenger van?
I take a call from my gynecologist. I had a yeast infection. It was recurring. I'm talking creams. I'm talking this and that.
Why would you ever take
Turns
that?
out it's real Eddie Murphy.
What is Eddie Murphy saying?
He's just like, oh, what is happening back there? And I'm like, Jesus, fake Eddie Murphy needs to like get it together. I want to do my business.
There was, I mean, the day
No, there's a whole book about Eddie Murphy.
There was a guy who read lines of Eddie Murphy. There's a guy who there's a guy that they shot behind his head who just had ears and back of head of Eddie Murphy. And then there's this guy who's half a face of Eddie Murphy.
That guy appears as Eddie Murphy in Asia. At openings, like if you see like Eddie Murphy cutting the ribbon, that might not be Eddie Murphy.
By the way, they all were lovely people. I just was surprised that like the small business of Eddie Murphying. Like I was like, wow, there's a lot of Eddies.
Are you the real Paul?
I don't travel. The real Paul Scheer doesn't leave the East Side, so this is notice I've always been like this the entire time.
Anyway, we digress.
Yeah. So, but to all that to say is, what's great about what I hope with this book is, and I think the only reason it's like, I hope that people who have no idea who I am can read this and be like, I think if you read this and you don't know who I am, you might be like, oh wow, he never made that dream of becoming an actor, because there's no real success story in this book, but like it really is. It's like, oh, he got the audition for SNL and didn't work out. Okay, but I am okay with that. Like I'm okay with the idea of I want it to be a book that's not like about like leave those big biographies for people. Like I have a whole life in front of me, or at least a half of it, and I can write that other version later. But I think it's more interesting to have a conversation that's like not about like celebrity and showbiz and movies and stuff like that. I mean, I already talked about it enough.
I think this book makes us all feel less alone. And I don't know if you guys felt the same way, but that is such a tribute to you, Paul. And thank you for writing this beautiful book.
Thank you for being here, Jess. I really appreciate it. Thank you for everybody tuning in. But more importantly, thank you everybody for coming out at 6 o'clock on a Tuesday. I really appreciate it. And I was happy to leave my house at 2:30 to get here by 5. But yeah, so what do you want to do? How do you want to do?
We'll have you guys stand up there and sign, and
Okay.
if you need any copies,
You don't have to say, you can go do your thing. I don't want to make you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. You're the best. Thank you so much for doing that. You're the best. These chairs are so high.